Today, our objectives are to understand why Valley Water is concerned about avian resources. We will develop the knowledge and skills necessary to locate and avoid grassland and barren ground nesting birds. We'll identify techniques to avoid or minimize impacts to avian resources. And we'll identify the steps needed to document the presence of a bird nest. Why protect nesting birds? Our stream stewardship mission is to protect and enhance watersheds and natural resources, and to improve the quality of life in Santa Clara County. Not only are birds and their habitat a natural resource that we protect, but they also play a critical role in maintaining a healthy environment. Birds control pests, like insects and rodents. They pollinate flowers and disperse seeds, which allows plants and habitat to grow. Without birds, it would be impossible to enhance our watersheds. We have developed nesting bird guidelines that follow state and federal laws that protect birds. In 1918, a federal law was passed to protect over 1,000 species of birds, called the Migratory Bird Treaty Act, which states that we must manage and conserve migratory birds that cross national borders. This act makes it illegal to, quote-unquote, take or harm any bird or any part of bird, including feathers, eggs, and nests, without an authorized permit. The definition of take is defined as any act to pursue, hunt, shoot, wound, kill, trap, capture, or collect. The Bald Eagle Protection Act is another federal law that prohibits taking or harming bald eagles and golden eagles. In California, we follow our own additional state laws, such as the California Fish and Game Code, which states that any action that results in the direct loss of birds, nests, eggs, including nest abandonment or failure, are considered take, which again is unlawful. All native bird species in Santa Clara County are protected by the Migratory Bird Treaty Act and California Fish and Game Code. This is why it is important to follow our nesting bird guidelines in order to prevent take of any nesting bird while we complete work activities in our watersheds. Let's talk a little more about what is unlawful under the Migratory Bird Treaty Act and the California Fish and Game Code. Hunting or killing a bird is an obvious example of harm to a bird. Capturing a bird or pursuing a bird can cause the bird stress, which could cause the bird's health to decline and even for the bird to die. If you disturb or destroy a bird's nest, this could cause the eggs to fail, which is considered take of a bird. Not only do the chicks die, but this is risky for the nesting adult as well. Birds spend a lot of energy preparing for the nesting season, exerting energy by finding territory, fighting for mates, collecting food, building nests, and developing and laying their eggs. The time that a bird is on a nest is critical, and the adult is sacrificing a lot of its energy to protect and warm the eggs. If a nest fails, that's a lot of work for nothing. So we understand why disturbing or destroying a nest has a negative impact for the life of a bird. But let's talk about a more subtle example of take when it comes to working around nests. While conducting a nesting bird survey, you might accidentally spook a bird off of the nest as you walk by or while you're moving through vegetation. When this happens, the surveyor is expected to move away and monitor the bird until it returns to the nest. If the bird returns to its nest and the nest has not been damaged, this is not a violation. The bird has not been harmed and the nest has not been disturbed or altered. Say when you spook a small bird, it flies off of the nest and is suddenly attacked by a hawk and eaten. This is considered take, because your interference caused the bird to leave its hiding spot and exposed it to a predator. The death of the bird is a direct result of human disturbance. This is a violation of the law. Another example. Recently, a crew was tasked with removing invasive vegetation in one of our watersheds. A biologist conducted a nesting bird survey before work started and did not find any nests. The work was clear to proceed. As the crew began to cut back vegetation, a well-hidden bird nest was exposed and the adult flew off the nest. The crew and biologist immediately stopped all work and moved away from the now exposed nest. The adult bird returned to the nest, and we think that this is not a violation because the adult returned to the nest, right? Wrong. Unfortunately, human action of removing vegetation caused a well-hidden nest to suddenly be well exposed. This means that there is a greater chance of a predator finding the nest and killing the adult or eggs. The nest is now also more exposed to bad weather, like rain or the heat of sun, which could cause the nest to fail. The failure of the nest would very likely be a direct result of human interference, which is considered a violation. Anytime there is an incident that could result in a possible violation, or there is a violation, the incident must be reported within 24 hours. The nest should be continuously monitored by a biologist until the nest is observed to be successful, such as the eggs hatch, the chicks are reared, and the fledglings survive and fly off. Then we know for sure that human disturbance did not cause the nest to fail, and it would not be a violation. This is why it is so important that we complete nesting bird surveys before any work starts. It can be difficult to see or find a nest in a work area, so crews should also stay alert while working and stop work immediately if they see a nest or observe a bird behavior that indicates a nest might be nearby. All nests found must be given a no-work buffer zone to make sure that the nest and the bird is not disturbed. How does Valley Water protect migratory bird nests? We implement district nesting bird guidelines, which include pre-construction and pre-activity surveys. We try to time projects to avoid the nesting season when possible. We provide training programs. We create buffers around nesting birds where no work can occur. That way we can avoid any disturbance of the nest. We also provide nest monitoring to ensure the success of nesting birds. Nesting bird training. To qualify to conduct barren ground and grassland nesting bird surveys independently, you must both attend an annual lecture training and demonstrate adequate field training and experience. The lecture training requirement is fulfilled by attending the yearly presentations given by the district wildlife biologists. The sign-in sheet keeps track of who attends the training. Please make sure you have signed it. The field training requirement is accomplished by obtaining a district wildlife biologist signature on the field survey qualification form, which you will receive a little later. Field Survey Qualification Form. This form allows a district wildlife biologist to determine whether a trainee has demonstrated ongoing field proficiency in finding nests. Make sure to record any bird surveys you have participated in and any nests that you have found. Put it on this form. You'll need a signature from a district wildlife biologist. It's required on the form in order to fulfill the field training requirement each year. Every year, don't forget. The new form will be handed out at the end of this training. Demonstrating field proficiency. Some individuals may already have adequate field experience for a biologist to sign off on their forms. If you need to gain more field experience, You can participate in one or more formal training sessions. You could also accompany a biologist or designated individual in a nesting bird survey. Please remember to keep records of field training on your forms, including the nests that you have found. Dates and times for formal field training sessions will be announced by district wildlife biologists. These sessions are limited to 10 trainees at a time. Designated individuals. Once you've completed the training, you will be considered a designated individual according to the district's nesting bird guidelines. What is a designated individual? It is a non-wildlife biologist that is trained to conduct nesting bird surveys. It will be your responsibility to report results to the district wildlife biologists. Nest surveys should be conducted before any site activity or work that might affect nesting birds. Birds are pretty sneaky. They really could be anywhere. What does a designated individual do? They can conduct nest surveys in grasslands and barren ground areas. These are areas that are defined as having less than 10% woody vegetation. You can contact a wildlife biologist if you need a nest survey to be done in brushland, woodland, and forests. So this could also include like oak woodland, riparian corridors, etc. You can also contact a wildlife biologist if you have a questionable site. So if you have a survey with limited overhanging growth trimming and you're not sure about potential nests in the trees, contact us. If you're in an area adjacent to a sensitive habitat, contact us. We're pretty friendly. Feel free to reach out. We'll help you.
My name is Chris Van Amberg, and I'm an associate biologist for the Stream Maintenance Program. Today I'm going to be discussing barren ground nesting survey guidelines and survey techniques. As most of you are well aware of, the nesting season in the SMP permits is January 15th through August 31st. However, we do find nesting birds year-round, so it's important to keep an eye out for active nests. What is an active nest? An active nest is any structure used by a bird that can support eggs or nestling birds. There are many different types of nests constructed by birds. Some of them you may encounter are cup nests, hanging nests, platform nests, and scrapes. And we'll go over more of these in the other slides. And there are some examples of nests here. The top ones there are more examples of hanging and cup nests. And then on the bottom left and center, you have examples of barren ground nests such as scrapes. And on the right picture is a swallow nest, which are made of mud, and those are generally on structures such as bridges or overhangs. So there are many different types that you can find out in the field while doing these surveys. Grassland and barren ground nesting bird surveys are conducted for a variety of work activities, including handwork or weed eating, herbicide application, tractor or boom mowing, and road grading, to name a few. These sites can be a variety of shapes, including long and linear sites, which would be along a creek channel, which is pictured here. They could be round or square parcels, such as open fields, and they could be range in size from very small to over multiple acres in size. An important factor while conducting grassland and barren ground nesting surveys is to avoid alerting predators to the nest presence. Some examples of predators are jays, crows and ravens, or birds of prey such as hawks, eagles, owls, or falcons. If you do see any of these species while you're conducting your nesting surveys, it's important to stop and make sure they leave the area before continuing. If you do find a nest, these predators can be alerted by your flagging or your presence and may find the nest and disturb it. Grassland and barren ground nesting surveys are required to be conducted during the nesting season. Surveys should be conducted as close to the start of work as possible and generally within the first 4 hours after sunrise. Surveys should be conducted during good weather, no rain, heavy winds, or other bad weather that may impact bird behavior. These surveys are valid for a period of 14 days. While conducting these surveys, it's important to observe what is going on around you. What bird species are on site? What areas are being used more frequently by the birds? What behavior are the birds displaying? This all can help you identify nests while on site. For nonlinear sites, it's important to wait a minimum of 5 minutes and observe what is going on the site. For linear sites, you might have to observe, walk a little bit, observe, and continue that process. Depending on the site, there are three main techniques we utilize while conducting grassland and barren ground nesting surveys: walking, sticking, and rope drag. The walking technique is basically just walking the site and observing and identifying nesting birds. This is good for long linear plots and small areas. Sticking is a technique which utilizes a long stick held out in front of you to hit the top of the grass. This can help flush nesting birds and identify their nests. This technique is generally good for long linear plots and small rectangular plots. Rope drag is a technique that requires 3 individuals. 2 people carry a rope in between themselves with the third person behind, observing and identifying any birds that may be flushed and identifying their nests. This technique is generally good for large rectangular plots. All these techniques are covered in our field course, which will be conducted at a later date. And it's important to remember that all these techniques can be used in a multitude of sites, so utilize these however you feel fit. There are some important things to remember if you do encounter a nest while conducting surveys. The first thing is to try and identify the nest. Don't make too much of an effort where you may disturb the nest or attract unwanted attention, but just try and see if it's a cup nest, if it's a scrape, and if not, that's okay. The next most important thing is to create a buffer around the nest. Now, most of these surveys you're conducting will be in barren ground and grassland areas, which will require a minimum of a 25-foot buffer around the nest. There are 3 main ways nest buffers are marked in the field: blue flagging, which is the most common, blue paint on the ground, such as on a maintenance road, or posts with blue flagging if there's nowhere to tie the flagging to. The most important thing is to make sure the flagging is visible to all workers on the site so they can maintain the appropriate buffer around the nest. It's also important to avoid creating recreational opportunities that could impact the nest. Another good technique is to tie flagging if there is a nest on the gates at the entrance to the site. This helps to alert crews so they can be observant and make sure they do not impact any nests that may be flagged. If a nest is flagged in the field, it's important to ensure the buffer stays until the work is completed and the nest is no longer active. Eggs usually hatch within 35 days. However, this is just a rule of thumb. Once the eggs hatch, for ground nesting birds, these species usually leave the nest within a few hours or a day or two. For cup nests, they usually remain in the nest for at least a few weeks. And for platform nesting birds, such as raptors, they can take a month or more. There are certain species you may encounter while conducting grassland and barren ground nesting surveys that will require notification to the district biologist at the numbers listed here. Some of these species are birds of prey, such as raptors and falcons, terns, snowy plovers, burrowing owl, which is pictured on the left, short-eared owl, which is pictured in the middle, and northern hares, which are pictured on the right. These species are generally ground nesting, however, they will require greater than 25-foot buffer, so it is important to notify the biologist listed here, like I mentioned before, immediately upon encountering these species. Of these species, the most common one you may encounter is the burrowing owl. Burrowing owls are small owls that utilize abandoned rodent burrows to nest in. These burrows are generally lined with feathers, whitewash, and owl pellets, showing you that they may be occupied by a burrowing owl and an active nest could be inside. If you encounter any of this around a rodent burrow, it's important to buffer it and notify district biologists immediately. At the completion of the grassland and barren ground nesting surveys, it is important to fill out the survey form. One form is required for each site, even if no nests are found. All surveys should be recorded on this survey form, and please remember to fill it out completely and accurately for each survey and turn it in at the end of the day. Now we'll go over how to fill out this form. The first thing to do if it's an initial survey is to fill out the date, the start time of the survey, the end time of the survey, and the weather. If this is a resurvey, please check the resurvey box and fill out the date and the rest of the appropriate information. There's also a line for work order number if you have that handy. The next important thing is for the location. It is important to provide the creek, GIS station, and if known, if not, cross streets may also be used. And then also identify the survey method that was used. More than one box can be checked here. If other is checked, please accurately describe how your survey was conducted. The next section to fill out is the location of the nest. It is important to provide as much detail as possible in this section. First thing is, where is the nest located? Is it on the ground? Is it in a bush? Is it in a rundo? Wherever it may be, please describe that accurately here. Next, you can put bank. I usually like to use north, south, east, or west to identify banks instead of left or right because most folks generally do not know if you're looking upstream or downstream. The next is the nearest cross street if that's possible, and the GIS stationing if that's available as well. Following that, we need to describe the species of bird that made the nest. If you did not see the species that made the nest, that's fine, and please describe that here. If you were able to see this bird, please accurately describe what species it was if you do know. If not, a common name or some kind of description is important to put here. As much information as possible should be included in this section. If a nest was flagged and buffered, it's important to fill out this section. The first box is for a 25-foot buffer, which would be the most appropriate for the majority of surveys you'll be conducting. The next is if you had to increase or decrease the buffer distance. Please explain why this buffer was increased or decreased in this section. The third one is for a 50-foot buffer, which generally is for in trees or structure nests. The next section is how was a buffer identified? Was it flagged using blue flagging, paint, post? Please describe in as much detail how the nest was buffered. Finally, the nest contents. These doesn't necessarily have to be filled out if you thought you might disturb the nest too much, but if you're able to, please describe in as much detail as possible what was in the nest. The final section to fill out of this form is to identify the individuals who conducted the surveys. Surveyors shall include at least one designated individual who has fulfilled the lecture and field training requirements. Surveyors may also include other observers who are seeking additional field experience. Surveyors will be responsible for responding to any questions that may arise on the data provided. If this is a resurvey, please fill out this box with as much information pertaining to the resurvey as possible, including who conducted the survey, the nest contents, and the condition of the nest, and when you visited the nest. That concludes our presentation. Are there any questions?
Hi, I'm John Jankovitz, Senior Biologist with Watersheds Operation and Maintenance at Valley Water. We're going to discuss common bird identification and their nests. Here's a list of 16 common ground nesting birds that you may observe in the field. In general, ground nesting birds receive a 25-foot buffer under the stream maintenance program, whereas raptors, such as owls and northern harrier, will receive a 250-foot buffer. We'll go into the details further. Here's a list of 13 other common bird species that you're likely to encounter in the field. These birds nest in trees and shrubs and other structures, and in general will receive a 50-foot buffer. Raptors, egrets, and herons will receive a 250-foot buffer. Eagles, such as bald eagles and golden eagles, receive special large buffers. Eagle nests receive half-a-mile buffer. There are currently active bald eagle nests in Milpitas, and if you do observe a bald eagle or a golden eagle in the field, please notify an SMP biologist. It is a rare occurrence, however, eagles are easily identified by their large stature and large wingspan. The first ground nesting species we'll talk about is the killdeer, which has a sound like this. The kilder is a medium-sized bird with brown upper parts and white underparts, and it has two distinct black bands that cross the upper breast. There are white stripes on long wings that are visible during flight. The flight is fast, with rapid and strong wing beats. This species nests on barren ground, often on levees and gravel roads, and when a nest is approached, the adult may do what's called a broken wing display, where the adult is distracting observers away from the nest. And this is an appearance of a hurt bird. However, they are okay. They are simply trying to distract you. They generally lay 3 to 5 blotched eggs that incubate for 24 to 26 days, and shortly after hatching, the young leave the nest. This species may attempt a second clutch in a new nest. Here's an example of a typical kilder nest. This one has juveniles in the nest. You could see that it's essentially just on a gravel setting, and often may be again observed on levees or stream banks. The mallard is a common duck species observed in Santa Clara County, which has a sound like this. The mallard male has a gray body, chestnut brown breast, and the head is often green, and there's a white ring around the neck. The bill is yellow or green, and the wing has a speculum, which is essentially a purple or blue tinge, and the female is a molted brown with mostly white tail and has a brown saddled orange bill and no curl on the tail. This bird nests near the water, often in grass or forbs. The nest is hollow within vegetation and is often lined in grass or feathers that may cover the eggs. They lay 5 to 14 green or gray buff eggs that have an incubation time of 26 to 29 days, and the ducklings leave the nest soon after hatching. The Canada goose is the most common goose species observed in Santa Clara County and has a sound like this. Both male and female of the Canada goose look the same and are identified by their long necks, dark upper parts, and pale underparts fading into white. The head and neck are black with a white chin bar. This goose nests along bare ground, grasslands, or stream terraces, and the nest type is generally a hollow nest or a scrape. The nest is made of sticks, grass, weeds, or moss, and often lined in down feathers. They typically lay 4 to 7 large white eggs with an incubation time of 25 to 30 days. And the goslings will leave the nest soon after hatching. The mourning dove is a common bird species observed throughout the landscape and has a sound like this. The mourning dove is a medium-sized dove with gray-brown upper parts and pink-brown underparts. The eyes are dark with small black spots underneath, and the bill is dark. The wings are gray-brown with black spots and dark primaries. The tail is long and pointed with black-edged white tips on the outer feathers. This bird will nest in trees or sturdy annuals, and sometimes also on the ground. Their nest type is generally a flimsy platform made of twigs with finer twig linings. This bird generally lays about 2 eggs and has approximately a 14-day incubation time. After hatching, the young birds will fledge in a period of 3 to 15 days, and they often have multiple clutches from February to October. Here's an example of a mourning dove on a nest. Sparrows encompass a large group of birds and are often difficult to identify as species, even for experienced birders, and may have a sound like this. Sparrows are usually identified as a small bird, generally in brown coloration with a small beak. They nest on everything from ground to short vegetation, under clumps of vegetation, sometimes in trees as well. Their nest types is generally a hollow type or a cup type made of grass or forbs. Sparrows can lay 3 to 6 eggs that have an 8 to 14 day incubation time, and the young generally fledge the nests in approximately 18 days. The California quail is our state bird and is also a common ground nesting bird in the county and has a sound like this. The California quail is identified as a small bird, often on the ground. They have distinctive curled black head plumes and white bordered black throats. The breast is gray and the belly is sharply scaled. There's flanks that are brown with white streaks, and the back is olive brown with a small black bill and gray legs. The female is browner and lacks dark central patch on the belly. This species of bird nests in the open brushy habitat and is often in a shallow ground depression. The nest is a hollow type nest lined in vegetation. They lay 12 to 16 buff to yellow eggs that are small, that have an incubation time of 18 to 23 days. It takes about 3 weeks to lay a clutch, and they may attempt a second clutch after already producing one nest. Here are a few more examples of California quail. You can see their nest on the left, which is simply on the ground under some vegetation. And on the right, you can see a male quail in the foreground with some young birds in the back. The spotted towhee is a bird that's easily identified and has a sound like this. The spotted towhee is a large sparrow with white spotted black back and black rump. The breast is black, the belly is white, and the sides are a coppery brownish orange. The head is black and the eyes are red. The wings are black with white spots, and the tail is long and black with white corners. The female is duller with brown sides instead of black and fewer white spots. This species nests in the forest edges and thickets and is usually close to or on the ground. The nest type is a cup-style nest made of leaves, grass, and twigs, and is lined in fine grass or animal hair. Again, they nest on the ground or in low shrubs. This species lays 2 to 6 white-gray flecked eggs that has an incubation time of 12 to 14 days, and the young fledge 10 to 12 days after hatching. The California towhee has a sound like this. The California towhee is identified as a large sparrow with unified brown-gray body and faintly streaked underparts and a buff throat bordering with dark streaks. The tail is long with a cinnamon brown undertail, and the sexes are similar. Juveniles have both diffuse streaked underparts. This species nests in the forest or riparian edges and in open woodlands. The nest type is generally a cup-style nest made of leaves, grass, or twigs, and they nest in low bushes or in young trees. The species will lay 2 to 6 light blue eggs that have brown or black markings and has an incubation time of approximately 11 days. The western meadowlark has a sound like this. The western meadowlark is a short, stocky, ground-dwelling bird with dark streaked brown upper parts and bright yellow underparts with a broad black V on the breast. The crown is dark brown and whitely striped. They have dark eye stripes behind the eyes with yellow in front of the eyes. The bill is long and sharply pointed. This bird nests in the meadows and grasslands, and the type of nest is generally a dome-structured nest built of vegetation made of dried grass or plant stems. They lay 3 to 7 pale pink eggs and lay about 1 egg per day. They have an incubation time of 13 to 15 days, and the young will leave the nest in approximately 12 to 15 days after hatching. The dark-eyed junco is a small bird that has a sound like this. Dark-eyed junco is identified by its black hood, chestnut brown back, and buff brown flanks. This bird is small and generally nests on the ground or in low shrubs, and they have been identified nesting in ivy along stream banks. The nest type is a deep, compacted cup-style nest built with grass, rootlets, or moss. They lay 3 to 7 white, blue eggs that are marked with brown that have an incubation time of approximately 11 to 13 days. The wild turkey is a large bird that's non-native to California, however is considered a game bird and is therefore protected through Fish and Game Code. Aside from the commonly known gobble, the bird has a large range of vocalizations that may sound like this. This bird is easily identified as walking on the ground generally and has iridescent dark brown overall body with black and green bars. They have a small featherless head, and the female is smaller and duller, and their wings are generally barred in white and black. This bird nests in the forest edges, under shrubs, and against objects in a ground depression. Their nest type is a shallow, hollow-lined nest that's lined with vegetation and dead leaves. They will lay 8 to 12 white buff eggs that are sometimes marked with brown and red. They have a 27 to 28 incubation time, and the young poults will leave the nest soon after hatching. The red-winged blackbird is a common bird observed in marshes and grasslands and has a sound like this. The bird is easily identified generally by its jet black body and bright red shoulder patch edged with yellow on the bottom. Females and juveniles are heavily streaked with a dark and pale brown overall appearance. This bird will nest in the marshes and grasslands and along fields. Their nest type is well made, and it's generally in emergent vegetation or shrubs, and it's woven of sedges and grasses, and the nest is also lined in fine grasses. This bird will lay 3 to 5 pale bluish-green eggs that has a 10 to 12 incubation time, and the young will leave the nest in approximately 11 to 14 days, and this bird may also have multiple clutches in 1 year. Here's another example of a red-winged blackbird nest. You can notice the woven appearance that's in emergent vegetation. The northern harrier, also known as the marsh hawk, is a common raptor observed around marshes and has a sound like this. The northern harrier is a large hawk with gray or brown upper parts and distinct white rump, with dark gray band along the trailing edge of the wings. It has white underparts with a spotted breast and yellow eyes. This bird will nest on the ground, in marshes, and in meadows, and they usually nest on a raised mound of dirt or a clump of vegetation. The nest is made up of sticks and vegetation and is generally a thin layer that's lined with grass. This bird will lay 3 to 9 pale blue eggs that has an incubation time of 31 to 32 days, and the young will fledge in 35 to 37 days. And again, this is a raptor that will require 250 feet buffers if observed. The burrowing owl is a rare bird in Santa Clara County with special restrictions under the stream maintenance program, and it sounds like this. This is a small ground-dwelling owl with mostly brown body and numerous white spots. It's identified through its small stature and long legs. Both sexes also look similar. If you see this owl on the landscape, please call an SMP biologist for further recommendations on how to proceed with your work. They nest in levees and in open ground grasslands, and again, they use underground burrows for living and nesting. Here are some signs of burrowing owls that may be seen on the landscape even if you do not see the actual owl. On the left you can see what's called an owl pellet, which is essentially regurgitated matter that could be seen around a burrow. If you see a burrow like this one on the right with whitewash, owl pellets, and feathers, that likely shows signs that there is a burrowing owl that is using this dwelling, and please contact an SMP biologist for further considerations. The short-eared owl is another raptor species that may be observed and has a sound like this. This is a medium-sized owl with light and dark brown molted upper parts and dark streaked pale buff underparts. They have a large head that's round with a facial disc. Their eyes are yellow and their bills are black, and both sexes look similar. This owl nests on the ground, generally in meadows, and their nest type is a shallow, hollow-lined nest with grassy and feathers intermixed. They will generally lay 3 to 11 white eggs that have an incubation time of 25 to 29 days, and their young will fledge in 28 days. And once again, this is a raptor that will require 250 feet buffer zone. Black-necked stilt is a common bird observed in wetlands, marshes, and baylands, and has a sound like this. This bird is easily identified. It's a large shorebird with sharply contrasted black upper parts and white underparts. It has a long bill that's thin and upcurved. The legs are extremely long and red to pink. This bird will nest near shallow water, usually next to marshes. Their nest type is a shallow hollow type nest or even a scrape. And and the nest is lined with grass or even shell fragments. They lay 3 to 5 brown spotted eggs that have an incubation time of 25 to 26 days, and the young will leave the nest soon after hatching. The common snipe is a small bird that sounds like this. The common snipe, again, is a small bird that's best identified by the broad white stripe on the base of its underwing. Its upper parts are cryptically colored with brown and yellow-brown streaks of many different shades. The underparts are white, but strongly washed with orange and heavily barred and streaked in dark brown. This is a small bird that's generally found in marshes, and it nests along marshlands, grasslands, and edges of the riparian corridor. Their nest type is generally a shallow hollow, and they'll sometimes have vegetation pulled over it to conceal their nest, sometimes even with a woven canopy. This bird will lay 2 to 4 olive brown eggs that are marked and have an 18 to 20 day incubation period, and the young leave the nest shortly after hatching. Terns are a group of birds that constitute a number of different species that are difficult to identify and may have a sound like this. Terns are identified by their white underparts, gray upper parts, and generally a black capped head. They have a pointy tail and pointy bills. These birds will nest in sandy or gravel areas, generally near water, and they nest essentially in the open on a shallow hollow area or what's called a scrape. This bird is colonial and defensive, so be aware if you come up on a nesting area with multiple birds. Terns will lay 1 to 3 buff to brown spotted eggs that have an incubation time of 21 to 28 days. And the young can move within days, but generally stay within the nesting site. The ring-necked pheasant, again, is a non-native bird that's actually native to Asia, however is considered a game bird and is therefore protected under Fish and Game Code. The bird may have a sound something like this. This is a large chicken-like bird. The male has a metallic brown body and scaled breast and a red eye patch with a white ring around the neck. The head is iridescent green, and it's identified by its long, pointy tail. The female is a pale brown with dark markings, a shorter tail, and it lacks the red head. This bird will nest in grassy woodland edges, shrublands, and also pastures. Their nest type is generally in a depression, sometimes lined with leaves or grass. They lay 10 to 12 brownish olive eggs that have an incubation time of 23 to 25 days, and the young will fledge the nest after approximately 12 days. The northern mockingbird has a wide range of vocalizations, but may sound like this. Or this. Or this. The mockingbird is identified by its medium size, gray upper parts, pale gray underparts, and faint eyeline. The wings are gray-black with 2 white bars and large white patches visible when they spread. The tail is long and gray and edged in white. This bird will nest in many different habitats, but generally in the open and partly open habitats. Their nest type is a cup-style nest made of twigs that's lined in grass. They lay 3 to 5 heavily marked blue-green eggs that have an incubation time of 12 to 13 days, and the young will fledge the nest in approximately 11 to 13 days. The California scrub jay is a bird that sounds like this. This bird is easily identified. It's a medium-sized bird with blue and black upper parts and a gray to white underparts. They have a black bill and black eyes. This bird will nest in low trees and in dense shrubs. They have a cup-style nest that's made of twigs, that's lined in moss, grass, fine roots, and animal hair. This bird will lay 2 to 7 green with olive-marked eggs, or pale gray eggs with reddish-brown markings. They have an incubation time of 15 to 17 days, and the young will fledge in approximately 18 days after hatching. Goldfinches are a noisy little bird that sounds like this. This bird is easily identified by its bright yellow body, its black cap on males, and the wings have flashy white patches and bright yellow shoulder bars. The bill is pink and conical. The female is duller with an olive back that lacks the black cap. This bird will nest in open habitat with scattered trees and shrubs or in fields. They make tightly woven cup-style nests made of grass and plant down. They will lay 4 to 6 pale blue to white eggs that have an incubation time of 10 to 12 days, and the young will fledge the nest in 11 to 17 days. Bush tit is a bird that sounds like this. The bush tit is a tiny acrobatic bird with gray or brown upper parts and paler underparts. The eyes are dark brown and the bill is tiny and the tail is long. This bird makes very distinct nests that are suspended in bush or trees. The nest is a jug-shaped hanging pouch with a top entrance that's made of soft plant wool and or lichen. The inside is lined with vegetation and is often secured together with spider webs. This bird will lay 5 to 7 white eggs that have an incubation time of about 12 days, and the young will fledge after about 16 to 17 days after hatching. Anna's hummingbird is a tiny bird that often nests early, and it sounds like this. This bird is easily identified by its long pointy bill, its fast wing beat. The males have bronze green upper parts and dull gray-green underparts. The hood and throat are iridescent red, but may appear black or dark purple in low light. The tail is dark green with black outer tail feathers. The female is duller with a green cap and sometimes shows metallic red or purple patches and spots on the throat. This bird nests in trees and bushes and usually fastens its nest onto a sheltered horizontal limb. The nest is tiny. It's a woven cup style nest made of twigs and lichen. They will lay 1 to 3 white eggs that have an incubation time of 14 to 19 days, and the young will fledge about 18 to 28 days after hatching. Hummingbirds' nests are small and cryptic by nature. Here's an example of one in a tree. It's difficult to observe. Can you see it? There it is. Difficult to observe, right? Although the hummingbird's nests are generally in trees and bushes, fastened onto a sheltered horizontal limb, they have also been observed on fence lines, as in this picture. The red-shouldered hawk is a common hawk species observed in Santa Clara County and sounds like this. This is a large hawk with brown upper parts and head. The underparts are white with rust-red barring, and the wings are finely barred with red-brown shoulders and pale below with red-brown wash and dark tips. The tail is dark with thick white bands, and both sexes look similar. This bird will nest mostly in trees, and they make large stick-style nests. They will lay 2 to 6 white to blue eggs that have a 28-day incubation time, and there is a long fledge time with these birds, and they won't fledge until after 5 to 7 weeks. Again, this is a raptor that requires a 250-foot buffer if observed on a nest. Red-tailed hawk is another common hawk species in Santa Clara County and sounds like this. This is a large hawk. The upper parts are pale with brown streaks. The wings are pale below with dark bars at the leading edge and dark tips. The tail is red-brown with dark terminal bands. Both sexes also look similar on this hawk. This hawk will again nest in trees and make large stick-style nests that are lined in pine needles and bark. They will lay 2 to 3 white to blue eggs that have an incubation time of 30 days. And again, they won't fledge until after 6 weeks. Again, 250-foot buffer on these guys. Let us know if you observe them and are concerned about your work. The great blue heron is a common species that sounds like this. This bird is easily identified. It's a large, elegant heron with blue-gray back, black sides, and gray to white striped bellies. It has a very long neck and black bordered white throat stripes. The head has a white face, cap, and black crest. Both sexes look similar, and it's easily identified by its 6-foot wingspan in flight. This bird will nest in trees close to waterways and wetlands, occasionally on the ground or in reed beds. They nest in colonies, also known as rookeries, where a lot of birds will nest essentially in one tree. They have a large stick-style nest lined with twigs and leaves. They lay 2 to 7 blue eggs. They have an incubation time of 25 to 30 days. And the young will fledge after 5 to 11 weeks. The snowy egret has a sound like this. Snowy egret is a medium-sized white egret with a slender black bill and long, thin neck. They have a patch of yellow skin at the base of their bill. Their legs are long and black while their feet are bright yellow. Their head, neck, and back have a long, lacy plumes during breeding season. Both sexes look similar. This bird nests in trees that are usually 7 feet above the ground, occasionally in marshes and grasses, and rarely they'll nest on the ground as well. They again are nesting colonies or rookeries where multiple birds are nesting together. And the nest style they make is a platform nest that looks like a shallow oval, loosely woven together with twigs, sticks, and grasses. They'll lay 2 to 6 pale blue-green eggs that have a 24 to 25 day incubation period, and the young will fledge 20 to 24 days after hatching. This bird nest has a 250-foot buffer if observed. The black phoebe is also a common bird that sounds like this. The black phoebe is a flycatcher and is identified mostly by its black body and white belly. The outer tail feathers and undertail are white, and both sexes look similar. This bird will nest under bridges, sheltered ledges, building crevices, or in hanging roots. They make a cup-style nest that's made of mud that's lined in moss and vegetation. It's a very distinct style nest. They will lay 3 to 6 white eggs that have an incubation time of 15 to 17 days, and the young will fledge 18 to 21 days after hatching. The last bird we're going to discuss today is the cliff swallow, which sounds like this. The cliff swallow is a small stocky bird with dark blue-gray upper parts, pale orange-brown rump, and a buff underparts. The forehead is white or buff, while the throat and sides of the face are orange-brown. The tail is dark and squared. This bird usually nests in sheltered cliffs or under an eave or bridges. They generally nest in colonies as well. Their nest style is gourd-shaped, and it's made of mud, and it's mud lined with feathers. This bird will lay 3 to 6 creamy white to light pink eggs that have an incubation time of 14 to 16 days, and the young will fledge 21 to 23 days after hatching. And this is a common bird found under our bridges.